So we're going to start day 17 all over again. And actually, chronologically, what happens in day 17 is Bhim enters the field and he sees Dushashan. And so this is totally new. We didn't cover this at all yet. Dushashan, let's just quick recap because a lot of things that happen today go back to Game of Dice. So it's interesting that actions have consequences and it's not immediate. And here it's been a good, well, I guess 14 years. They were in exile for 13, 12 plus 1. And then maybe the Game of Dice was, well, it would have been just before that. And by the time they prepared for the war and all of that. So let's say approximately 14. So the action was done 14 years ago and now they're reaping the consequence. And this is one of the reasons we don't quite get to really believe law of karma works, right? And fortunately, we have such a short memory. When it happens instantly, you know, we make the connection. But when it doesn't happen instantly, we forget. And I'm not sure if I said this or didn't say this. Forgetfulness is one of the things that is one of the powers of Maya. Maya makes us forget. And so like the way our delusion stays alive is this forgetful nature of ours. Firstly, we forgot we Brahman. That's like already a very big one. But then we even forget that the law of karma works. And that when I do something, I'm going to have to face the result. So Game of Dice, Yudhishthira lost. Sahadev, Nakula, Arjuna, no, Bhim, Arjuna, and himself in that order. They then say, play Draupadi. Yudhishthira plays Draupadi. He loses. They call her. She says, no, I'm not going to come. There's a lot of back and forth. She gives valid reasons. The messenger comes, gives the reasons about dharma and my property. Do you have a right to gamble me? Did he lose himself? Then if he's already lost himself, then how can he play me? Because he doesn't even own himself, then he can't own anything else. Like super brilliant logic. But of course, they don't want to hear that. They were just wanting, you know, you get drunk with certain things at some point. So you can get drunk with lust. You can get drunk with power. You can get drunk in greed. Like it's something just clicks. And now you're no longer thinking rationally and you're a little bit like no longer have your humaneness. Rational thinking out, but even your humaneness, all your virtues, all out. So they were in that mode. Who? Kauravas. So they physically drag Draupadi in the hair. So Dushashan grabs Draupadi, pulls her by her hair. Seeing that itself, Bhim is furious. And already in his head thinks that hand that dare to grab Draupadi and pull her hair, I will cut off. Now, this is again, I mentioned this, I don't know when, our thoughts are so powerful. So powerful. That wasn't even part of his curse, but he thought it. And so today, day 17, Dushashan's hand is cut. Then she's in the court and ugly things are said. I don't want to go into them. But basically, Karna says she sleeps with her 5 husbands. What difference does she make if she sleeps with one? And now it doesn't matter who it is, whether married, not married. It's not for you to decide how many she sleeps with. Yeah. And it's totally her choice. But so even that, so firstly, it's an insult because that's Karna, who doesn't directly say it, but implies she's, well, in those days, it would have been considered a prostitute. Yeah. Because of the conservativeness of how they lived. But even the talking about a person as an object that can just be taken and used without any sense of respect is already so, it would have already felt so insulting and violating for Draupadi. right? Then second thing that happens, and I'm not going to go into too much, this is just all the curses take effect. These are the reasons I'm recapping this bit. Duryodhana says, come and sit on my lap, which is insult in itself. Yeah. Then he's, like I said, that button in the head is definitely switched because they're so crude. He pulls up his pants. He didn't need to do that. So he's got a bare thigh. And then he slaps himself very close to the ground on the uppermost end of his thigh and says, come sit here. Very suggestive. Obviously to anger everyone there, or, in that state of power where he may actually wanted, I don't know, but it was made everyone furious. So that didn't work. Draupadi doesn't budge. She fights. Finally, she says Krishna. She puts up her hand, and Dushashan tries to derobe her. So Bhim makes a promise. His vow is that he will kill Dushashan for trying to derobe her, for dragging her into the court. And he will drink his blood, Dushashan's blood. And I guess you're watching this person handling your beloved wife and the rage, and so that's what he says. Draupadi says she will not wash her hair till she washes it in Dushashan's blood. I'm sure she's washed her hair. It's been 14 years. Unless they had some yogic way of keeping it clean. But the idea was that anger, and this was how she wanted her revenge, right? She wanted that justice should be done for the wrong they have done, and this is when I'm going to feel justice is done. Bhim also vows that he will kill Duryodhana, and that thigh that he slapped, he will break it. And so everything's very vivid as per the events of the game of dice. Arjuna says, after Karna's harsh comments, that he will kill Karna, but there was no other dramatic, just I'm going to kill him. Of course, there was a lot of anger and all the rest of it, but to avenge Draupadi. Okay, so now, day 17 of the war, Bhim looks at Dushashan and, well, so Dushashan tries to fight, but doesn't really stand much of a chance. Now, Bhim's amazing, huh? He can do with bow and arrow, he fights with his sword, he fights, I think I said this at one point, he just fights with anything. But Bhim's greatest strength is he is Vayuputra, and so strength. His physical limbs crush. He has that much strength. So he said, forget all these arrows. He takes up his mace, and with full force, he hits Dushashan on the head. Dushashan flies something like 20 meters from the impact. This is like awesome cartoon animation. But you can see the cartoon animation drawing for the scene of the Mahabharata war. The kids would be so into it. So he goes flying some 20 meters. Bhim casually strolls up those 20 meters. In the meantime, Dushashan's dizzy, he's bleeding, his body is sore. He tries to save himself. Bhim's decided, no, done. No more. And he literally says, go and call Draupadi. Today she will wash her hair. Now it's so violent. When I haven't seen Game of Thrones, I've seen snippets or I've seen highlights or and I can't watch it because it's so grotesquely violent. The scene is up there. So I'm going to do it really fast. Bhim cuts up Dushashan's hand, first and foremost. He already drinks the blood. The Kauravas are all horrified. Duryodhana is watching. Duryodhana, I mean, he loved all his brothers, but I guess the one that he spent the maximum time with, the kind of the one that's softest in your heart was Dushashan. So for him to be watching this scene is really, really hard. Then Dushashan's trying to get up, and Bhim says, like rage, so much anger. Recounts everything that I just recounted, but way more detailed about what happened in the game of dice. This is for when you did this. This is for how dare you touch it. This is for your insult. This is for your and so the Dushashan's, of course, physically wounded, and like I said, death is an interesting thing. The way we've lived our life really does come to play at the time of death. In chapter 8, that's said so clearly. And so here he's listening to all the horrible things that he's done his whole life. He knows this is death because Bhim's standing over him. His hand's already been cut off. And what's he hearing? That, you go going, and Bhim doesn't just kill him, he waits. That's himself. Like his body's literally shaking. The details are given there. And then finally, he stabs him with the sword near the heart and literally cuts out the heart. And I think that was actually part of the wound, and holds Dushashan. I told you it's very gross. Holds Dushashan's heart in his hand and shows it to Duryodhana. You next. Because Bhim took 2 vows and he is fulfilling his vow. I'm telling you, this would make an awesome movie. This kind of dramatic. Imagine the fun the character and the actor acting would have on this with Bhim's like after this rage, the sense of satisfaction holding Dushashan's heart. Then Draupadi comes. Draupadi, symbolically, I don't think in some movies they show her actually putting the blood all through her hair, and maybe, I don't know. I would like to think it was just symbolic, that she took a little bit like that, but maybe, I don't know, but she does. That Draupadi gets to fulfill what she thought would be her justice against Dushashan, right? Day 17, Draupadi gets quite a bit of justice. And then just soon after that, I think there were 10 more brothers that Bhim had to kill. So now 99 of them are dead. Only Duryodhana is left. Duryodhana we'll get to on day 18 of the war, which is the last day of the war. Now everyone's watching this scene. Everybody's watching Bhim kill Dushashan with, it's so violent. And then this cheer, and Bhim, they all cheer whenever they're in war, it's part of the battle cries. Bhim's is a little bit more unrestrained. He's definitely got no inhibitions in expressing his anger or his joy at someone's death, and so it's all like Arjuna blows his conch, and there's a smile on his face. He dances with the blood, and and it's like full on. And that personality types, it's true to who Bhim is. And in a way, it's interesting when I read the whole description, because in a war, it's almost all these kind of qualities that invokes more fear in the enemy and gets that, and it's that horridness of war. Like, why was Yudhishthira trying so hard not to have this war? Is because this kind of behavior comes out. And in war, it's acceptable to behave in this way. So, we really taking ourselves into a place where it's so primal. We behave in such a way that's so primal. Duryodhana is watching. Duryodhana goes through the whole range of emotions, fear, and then anger, and then wanting to get revenge, and then helplessness, and despair because he's seeing that the Pandavas are accomplishing everything they said they would accomplish. His army has shrunk. He's just watched all his brothers die now. He's the only one left. And so this, and then comes back with, no, we'll show them. How dare they do this? And comes out to fight. And that's where, and even Karna is watching. And Karna is also looking very, very horrified at what Bhim's done. I'm not sure exactly what's going on in Karna's mind because it's not written, but he's possibly thinking that's my brother. Or he's possibly thinking his turn's coming. Or he's just possibly thinking that, what did we do in that game of ties? Like, this is the outcome. And I'm hoping it's the third one he's thinking. Because then you learn the lesson. Right? And that's what's so important. It's so important for us to understand the consequences that we create. Because only then we change and make different choices. So Shaila, who's driving Karna's chariot at that point, sees Karna's horrified face and says to Karna, why are you so upset? This is war. Like, so casually. But remember, he has sympathies with the Pandavas, and it was his job to unnerve Karna as much as possible. And so he does. And then this big, huge, humongous fight between Karna and Arjuna starts. And last week I went into the whole insult and the praise and the Yudhishthira and the Arjuna and the sword coming out. And so we're not going to go into that now. We're just going to go into the actual fight between Karna and Arjuna. And so there was one more thing. I said that there were two curses against Karna, and there was the third thing that Shaila is insulting him. But there's also one more thing, and it might be related to Hanuman, which is why he jumps from one chariot to the other. And it's the only time in the war that he does that. But Arjuna is Indra's son, which we already know. And Karna is Surya Devata's son, which we already know. Now, the Devatas have had sons, or amshas would be a better word to use. They come down as amshas during every avatar to help Bhagwan play out the Leela. And a lot that happens in Krishna avatar is tying up loose ends from previous avatars. So by Krishna's the 9th avatar, and one more to come. So before Krishna's avatar, 8 avatars have happened in this yuga. And maybe a few things got left, didn't quite get finished. And maybe some, or maybe after that avatar, some devotee had some desire. And in Krishna's avatar, he really winds up everything. He really makes sure everything gets concluded beautifully, like done. Actually, Kalki's avatar, he really doesn't do much. As per Bhagavatam, maybe he does do a lot more, and Bhagavatam hasn't documented it because maybe Bhagavatam thinks it's so much at the tail of Kal Yuga, it doesn't matter what he does. Y'all don't need to know. I don't know why, but it's really short. Kalki avatar in Bhagavatam is so short. It's like literally 2 pages. It comes, kills a lot of people, resets, and you're back to Satya Yuga. So, or because maybe Krishna finished up most things. So coming back to, in Ram avatar, Surya Devata came as Sugriv, and Indra Devata came as Bali. And Bali bullied Sugriv for quite a long time. So Ramchandraji helps Sugriv and kills Bali. And when Bali dies, he's not angry with Ramchandraji, but he says, why you killed me? I love you too. Like in terms of you, Lord, creator of the whole universe. And then, but you bullied your brother and I know what to do. Actions have consequences. So Bali also took Sugriv's wife, so not on. Really not on. So now he got shot by Ramchandraji. But Ramchandraji held him in his hands as Bali died. So it's a really nice death, right? Be held by Ramchandraji, and it's like, and he's goes back to being Indra. So it's fine. He does, right? Yeah. So this lifetime, it's like, okay. Indra's son will live and Surya's son will die. So that there's no partiality. So from one point of view, you can see it that Indra and Surya have this little bit of kind of like sibling rivalry. But from another point of view, you see it as the Lord is impartial and helps and loves each and every one. But actions have consequences. So the consequences will be given. And so when we see that Bali was killed because he had the consequences that he chose, here you see the same thing with Karna. Karna is being killed because of the consequences he did. Not because Bhagwan liked Surya Devata more or Indra Devata more, or it's like he loves everyone, but actions will have consequences and he will make sure that the consequences are met. Because otherwise we don't learn. We don't learn and we don't progress. So to help us to learn, we have to face the consequences. And that's what I was saying, that's his compassion. That's his compassion. Okay, so this lifetime, Karna's going to die even for that reason, but not specifically. But it's just nice to know how it's in the bigger thing. So like I said also, so when they start fighting this, and somebody please remind me to research this before next week's class, Hanumanji jumps from Arjuna's chariot to Karna's chariot, and Arjuna's chariot's flag was Hanumanji. Karna's chariot flag had a jewel and the noose of Yamraj. Now, it must have something to do with this noose of Yamraj because Hanumanji destroys the noose. So we need the backstory for this. And he's not participated the whole war. Huh? Half the time he was sleeping during this war because he felt Krishna wasn't fighting and it wasn't worth watching. But this bit, he's really engaged. And he's loud. So everybody stops to hear what he cries. And then everybody starts to watch the battle that's going on between Karna and Arjuna. And I think I mentioned this. Everybody stopped. Everybody sat down. Everybody's watching it because it was phenomenal. Their skill, their strength, everything was incredibly phenomenal. But one more thing before they start the fight, Arjuna stops. So Karna and him have engaged. And just before the fight is about to start, Arjuna looks at Krishna and says, but will you be okay? Because Karna's very efficient as an archer and he's going to throw all these arrows. And what if you get hurt, Krishna? And it's the cutest thing. That, like this is the moment of the war that he himself has been waiting for. He's just gone through this whole saga with Yudhishthira, with the back and the forth and the crying. And now they're about to fight. And suddenly Arjuna is telling Krishna, but are you going to be okay? Like, should we put more armor on you? Because he's going to be throwing all these arrows at me. And true, a few arrows do pierce Krishna. Just like a few arrows pierce Shaila. And that's just, right? It's just battle that's going to happen. And then just before the fight starts, and this is interesting, right? Because I just said about being, and he goes in there like gung-ho and like cuts up the hand and rips out the heart. Whereas Arjuna actually has to remind himself of why he's angry with Karna. And so he closes his eyes and he says, today I do this for you, Draupadi, because I failed you and you had to hear such insults and you never deserved it. And then he says, today I do this for you, Abhimanyu, because who could ask for a better son? And how they take you from you. And then he says, and today I do this for you, Subhadra, who's Abhimanyu's mother. Because even though I can never bring Abhimanyu back, maybe you'll sleep just slightly better knowing some kind of justice. I don't know if it is justice, but I guess in many people's heart, they feel there's a sense of justice when somebody else suffers. Personally, another person's suffering doesn't take away our suffering. But we don't always think so logically, right? Especially when we're emotional. So their fight starts and it's phenomenal, as I've already mentioned. And Ashwatthama, who has just lost Drona, his father, and who has just met Vedavyasa, who said to him that none of this can be avoided, goes to Duryodhana and tells Duryodhana, you can save yourself. You can save Karna. There's hardly 5 of us left. Stop this war. This fight, as glorious as it seems, why should either of them die? Like both are such glorious warriors. And Duryodhana says, after a while, he actually thinks about everything, Ashwatthama said, and then he finally decides, the Pandavas would never trust me after everything I've done. So there's no point. I was wondering if that's true or not. Most human, Bhim definitely wouldn't. Yudhishthira probably would. Arjuna and Nakula Sahadev would probably be torn. But it's an interesting question to ask ourselves. Would we? Every logic tells us no, right? We wouldn't trust. Which is why Krishna probably thinks that we have to clean the slate and start anew, because it can't be repaired. So does Duryodhana say this out of understanding or just out of his own self-pity? I'm not sure at this point, but the way he acts doesn't seem to be too intelligent going forward. He does a few silly things now. Okay, so then there's this another very interesting, two very, very interesting things that happened during Arjuna and Karna's fight. One, at one point, Karna is doing really well, and Krishna tells Arjuna, take my Sudarshan Chakra and just cut off his head. I have never heard anywhere Vishnu give his Sudarshan Chakra to anyone. Like it was just like, wow, how much love Krishna has for Arjuna that take like it's pocket money. Take the Sudarshan Chakra. It only destroys the whole universe. It's only time, right? The Sudarshan Chakra represents time. It's all the cycles. Like it's no ordinary weapon. And the Sudarshan Chakra is alive. Huh? It's a sentient being. It's not an innate object. So I was like, wow, how lucky is Arjuna, man? But also that sense that even though we don't hear it often in the stories, remember Arjuna represents devotee and the Lord the way we are, and that the Lord would give us whatever we need. Just really, really would give us anything that we need. And then there's the second incident, which is actually quite a famous story in the Mahabharata, which often gets told as an isolated incident. So while Karna and Arjuna are fighting, Karna, being skilled, takes out the Naga weapon, a weapon that's very, very powerful, and he aims it at Arjuna's throat. And even as he shoots it, he literally says, game over, Arjuna. Because it's pointed at Arjuna's throat, and this whole cut off your head thing seems to be a big thing on day 17. Actually, the whole war, right? Because we've had it happen a few times. Krishna sees the arrow. Arjuna doesn't. And Krishna takes his foot and stomps on the chariot, and the chariot goes in. The word used is a cubic. What's a measurement of a cubic? So it's apparently from the throat to the forehead. Arjuna's throat to Arjuna's forehead. It's how much the chariot sank into the ground. So when he did that, when he pushed the chariot into the ground, the horses also fell from the jerk of the chariot, and they would have also been hurt, poor things. And so the arrow hits Arjuna's crown and burns the crown to ashes immediately. So, two versions of the story exist. One version of the story is Arjuna tells Krishna, because when you in battle, when you hit somebody's krana, it's considered an insult. Arjuna tells Krishna, how did you allow him to insult me like that? Poor Krishna thinking, I just saved your life. Going to give me this about you being insulted? And the story often gets told that we think God's not helping us because we get whatever, some loss, some insult, some suffering. We don't know how much he's taken away. And so it's actually written in the scriptures that the law of karma works, but he takes away a little bit of everyone's consequence. Because if we had to get every consequence, we wouldn't be able to handle it. So universally, he does it universally. There's no bias. He takes away a little bit, just so that we can a little bit breathe. And so all of it is so we can grow. Why do we get the consequence of our action? So we can grow. Why does he help us relieve a little bit of it? So that we can grow. Like Krishna is very clear on what's the purpose here. Get moksha. Today, somebody asked me about something to do with my stance on, I think it was all these gender issues. And I said, it's very clear what my stance is on. Doesn't matter which gender you are or you like, get moksha. Why? Because that's Krishna's stance. Like, this is all distraction, guys. The main thing is moksha. And so here, coming back, how much Krishna is protecting Arjuna. Now, Shalya is protecting Karna too. He has. He definitely has. They both very skilled chariot drivers. But here, this was like save life. And the number of times that it's save life, this whole chariot gets sunk into the ground. So, version 2 of the story, the crown is burnt immediately, and Arjuna falls at Krishna's feet, says thank you. Without you, Krishna, I can do nothing. All my glory is your glory. All my success is your success. And so, and in this second version, Arjuna is now tying back up his hair so he can get ready back to fight. And Krishna's jumped off the chariot to pull it back out of the ground. Massage the horses. Like he hasn't forgotten. That's why I mentioned the horses were hurt. Krishna goes immediately and runs his hands over them so that they feel relief. And what's Arjuna doing? Fixing his hair. This is why we call Arjuna vain. No, I'm joking. Very grateful. Very, very, very grateful. Arjuna is very, very grateful. Okay, so they're fighting, and the first thing is Arjuna starts winning, and he's able to destroy Karna's armor. Now, this is significant because that's what they did to Abhimanyu. And so Karna says, stop. My arm has been undone. Let me redo it. And Arjuna actually hesitates and wants to stop. And it's Krishna that says, what are you doing? Keep fighting. And Karna tells Krishna, but my arm is undone. You know the rules. And immediately, Krishna says, you knew the rules when you all did that to Abhimanyu. And what did that sweet boy do to you? In fact, he looked up to you. He gave you all respect till the very end. And then his chariot starts sinking, which I have also mentioned. And interestingly, this Kal is time, which is also the Sudarshan Chakra, for a moment, and he's already started forgetting the mantras. Karna has already started forgetting the mantra. For a moment, Karna is thinking, who are me? What's happening? And Kal manifests as a voice in Karna's head saying, it is done. Whether to protect him or whether to make things worse, I'm not sure, but he's definitely flabbergasted at this point in time. And Krishna is fierce. He's really fierce. Krishna says in this many words, I'm doing this for Draupadi. Like, it's not even Arjuna doing this for Draupadi. Krishna says to Karna, I'm doing this for Draupadi. And this is a significant dialogue because he said, Krishna says in this many words, when Draupadi suffered in that court, nobody helped her. Every single person who didn't help her has to suffer. So even Yudhishthira's just suffered, Arjuna's just suffered. They've all suffered because even they didn't help Draupadi. So, and every time Krishna says something to Karna, and even though it's so harsh, Karna can't rebut. He can't, because he knows it's true. And so he just hang his head that yeah. And so clearly Krishna is pointing out action, consequence, action, consequence, action, consequence. Right? For stealing Yudhishthira's kingdom, for insulting someone as virtuous as Yudhishthira, making people homeless. They put the Pandavas out in the forest, right? I mean, anybody, you don't take away their home. So never mind, you want a palace, give them another home. Oh, kings, for goodness sake, you could have. But and so finally, this weapon that went, sorry, I'm just going to finish that little bit. So the Naga weapon, which was going to Arjuna's throat, actually Arjuna knows the counters for all these weapons, so he could potentially have counted it. But the reason Krishna sinks the chariot, because the weapon, Asura, by the name of Ashwasena, had merged his power and spirit into the weapon. So a Naga too, and at one point they burnt the forest, and I think his mother was killed by Arjuna, and so he wanted revenge, and so he had gotten into the weapon, and it would have hurt Arjuna because it wasn't a normal weapon now that he could just counter. It was possessed by a spirit. That's why Krishna pushed it into the ground. Normal weapon, Arjuna would have been able to counter. So now this Ashwasena goes to Karna and says, Krishna saved him this time, but shoot me again and I'll make sure I kill him for you because I want vengeance for me. And this is where suddenly now Karna, you see his Kshatriyaness, and you see these last 2-3 days, he insults the Pandavas. But other than that, he's living up to a lot of the Kshatriya rules. And he says, I don't need you to kill my enemy for you. And even at this point where his curses have started taking effect, it could have been an easy out for him, but he doesn't give in to it. So you still see some, all of us, right? You still see some good things in us. And then he says, besides that, you can't use any weapon twice. So I can't use that weapon again for you to be able to live in it. And finally, when he does fall, after that whole conversation with Krishna, a light comes out of Karna's body and merges with the sun that is setting in the sky. So Karna's the son of the Surya Devata, but also worshipped Surya Devata every single day of his life and had so much love And finally, he finds out that's his father. And when he does actually die, the sun is almost setting. It's almost like Surya Devata didn't want to see it. And the last weapon he uses, interestingly, belongs to the moon, the one that actually kills Karna. I don't know if it's poetic or irony, just the weapon that, but he actually, Arjuna didn't choose which all weapons to fire. Krishna was always saying, shoot this, and Arjuna was listening. And that weapon does cut up Karna's head. And so the head and the body are separate. And the sunlight is illuminating them both. But the light that comes out from the body, where the head and neck separate, goes and merges back into the sky, which is why I said it's that amsha. It's that sense of they came as amshas from the devatas rather than as children of the devatas. They were part of that power of the devatas. And so I've already mentioned Pandavas celebrate, the Kauravas are horrified. Once again, day 17 of the war is probably Duryodhana's worst day of his life because he's just seen Dushashan brutally killed and now he's watched Karna being killed. And again, this range of emotions that he goes through, but here it's grief. And it's almost like he's lost the will to live. It's just immense grief. And something happens to Duryodhana once Karna dies. It's like he suddenly becomes nice. Not completely, but there's a definite improvement here. So Kripacharya comes to tell him exactly what Ashwatthama said to Himalaya, that end this, otherwise, you're going to die. So I want you to at least live. Like this war's already over and give in. And how many people have told this to Duryodhana over the course of this entire war? Bhishma, Pitama, Drona, Veda, Vyasa, just about everyone's told him, right? The Shaila, the Kripacharya, this Ashwatthama's told him. And he's always been like, you're on their side. Nobody loves me. And he gives them this whole rant about loyalty and And so when Kripacharya says it now, he says, I know you have my welfare at heart. Interesting that losing Karna changes him. And Karna was his trump card. Karna was the reason he thought he could win. Even though it wasn't true. And so it fueled his delusion. It fueled his greed. And it fueled his jealousy. Why? Because I have this. I can win. And so when Karna is removed from the equation, the fuel is gone. And that's why he becomes a better person. And that night, the grief is so intense, he goes to Bhishma Pitama. And he's literally crying. And again, you go to the ones that you feel safe with. Bhishma Pitama at the end of the day is his grandfather. And how much he's insulted Bhishma Pitama for 11 days of the war. But who does he go to in his hour of need? Bhishma Pitama. His mother and father are there. They're in the palace and they're within a walking distance. In fact, Gandhavri is weeping because 99 sons of hers have died today. And when she hears how horrendously Dushashan is murdered, like which mother wants to hear that? And day 17 of the war, because you're going to see a very different Gandhavri tomorrow, day 18 of the war, we're not going to see it tomorrow, we're going to see it whenever it happens, but she's very different. Day 17 of the war, when she's grieving her 99 sons, she's thinking to herself, Duryodhana, now, at least now will you understand? At least now will you stop? Have you learned anything? Like I said, day 18 is a different story. But from all the people on the Kaurava side, Gandhabri was definitely the most level-headed. So Duryodhana is sitting at Bhishma Pitama weeping, and any parental figure, you don't want the kid to cry too much. You try and give them whatever solace you can. And at one point, Bhishma Pitama says, I know it's difficult, Duryodhana, but he was a Kshatriya and he died as a Kshatriya should. It's a glorious death for a Kshatriya to die in battle. And suddenly Duryodhana says, wait, he was a Kshatriya? How do you know this? Do you know who he was? And Bhishma Pitama says, maybe today is not the best day to tell you, but I think you need to know. And I promised him I wouldn't tell you while he was still alive. So I guess I can tell you now. Because Karna had asked Bhishma Pitama not to. He'd asked Kunti not to, he'd asked Krishna not to. And he says he was Kunti's son. And he knew it. And you should know the sacrifice he's made for you. Kunti had told him she'd accept him publicly. Krishna had offered him the kingdom. And he sacrificed all of that for you. And at this point, Duryodhana is just so distraught, like knowing that his friend loved him so much. Knowing his friend gave up his whole family, gave up kingdom just to help him get what he wanted. But this is why their friendship is so not praised. Like now that Karna is not there, Duryodhana is willing to give up kingdom. Why couldn't Karna convince him to give up kingdom? It's like, what gets into our head, huh? We decide that love is giving them what they want. And then we live our whole life giving them what they want. And then what happens? Mahabharata. This horrendous war. So many lives lost. So much heartache. And then this was so fascinating. So I'm going to skip ahead, even though we're going to come back to a few details. Day 18 of the war, when Duryodhana stands in front of Yudhishthira. So for however many years that they have lived, apparently they're about 200 years old at this point, 200, 300 years old, which is equivalent to our 50s. Every time Duryodhana saw Yudhishthira for the last 300 years, he would think, life is so unfair. He got everything, I got nothing. It wasn't even like you a horrible person. Actually, Duryodhana didn't think Yudhishthira was just a horrible person. He just thought, I want everything you have. You shouldn't have it, I should have it. Day 18, he wakes up, goes onto the battlefield, looks at Yudhishthira, and what does he think? You're actually a really nice person. You deserve to be Karna's brother. What just happened? Love. Love is what changes us. Love what makes us see things differently. Suddenly, when he sees how much Karna sacrificed, he looked at Yudhishthira differently. Because Yudhishthira sacrificed. If Karna had only sacrificed in a different way, if Karna could have only made Duryodhana see what a good person Yudhishthira was when, before the war. Like right now, Duryodhana can see. Right now, Duryodhana can see that Yudhishthira is an amazing person. Why couldn't Karna help Duryodhana see that more often? This is why they don't make it into the top 10 friendship list. Although their friendship was amazing. Like, look at Karna's sacrifice for Duryodhana. And look how gentle and sweet and loving Duryodhana is to Karna this whole time. Loyal and all of it. Like, they have such beautiful qualities in terms of a friendship. But the only flaw is that they helped each other do all the wrong things. They didn't help each other do what would help either of them improve. And so both of them are now going to be destroyed. Well, Karna already met his end in the Duryodhana world on day 18. So in a way, Karna gets beautiful closure. Not yet, actually. Day 19, when they're doing all the death rites after the war is over. Finally, Kunti tells Yudhishthira to do the Pinnadan for Karna. And her heart just can't bear it anymore that there's nobody there to do the pujas for Karna. Like, she already neglected him his whole life. She didn't want to neglect him in his death. And so Yudhishthira looks at Kunti like, why would I do that? Like, Yudhishthira has done for so many relatives already, right? So many people have died. And then weeping, Kunti finally says, because he was my first son. And the Pandavas' reactions to this is very, very interesting. First, shock, of course. And then Yudhishthira is so angry. It might be fatigue from the war, because Yudhishthira doesn't get angry easily. But he's so angry. What's he angry about? How could you not tell us? If we insulted our brother, we fought with our brother, we killed our brother. You must remember Yudhishthira specifically, Karna was his only fear. That entire time, Karna was his only fear. The only person he held a little bit of not so pleasantness for in his heart. And the whole time, Karna's his brother. And that too, older brother. And Yudhishthira so angry with her, so angry with her, so angry with her, that Yudhishthira curses all of women. Because of Kunti, all of womankind get cursed. What's his curse? That women will never be able to keep a secret. I don't know if this is actually true, but I get it in families and you know, like in movies, it gets sold very often. Like whenever like there's gossip or whenever like somebody says, you know, planning a surprise party, and then you know they're planning a surprise party, then everyone will say, "See, this is Yudhishthira's curse." He was serious. Yudhishthira was very serious. He said something like this shouldn't be kept a secret. I don't know if it was women should never be able to keep a secret, but I think it's like this kind of a secret should never be able to be kept. Like a father should know who his child is, siblings should know who their siblings are. Again, I don't know if it's actually come into effect or because he was so angry the curse didn't take effect. I'm not sure. I've often thought about this because I think, is it true? You didn't know this? Yeah. And so Yudhishthira does do Karna's final rites and cries profusely, apologizes profusely to Karna for every wrong that they have committed. The other brothers too have a lot of wounds. But Always the five Pandavas. Karna never gets included as a Pandava. But that was his choice, so don't be sad. He chose Duryodhana. The choices will bring us the destiny we face. He could have been one. He declined. He could have thought of Krishna. He declined. But Krishna's compassion. And Krishna was there for him at the very end. And Krishna made sure that Karna's karmas were cleaned. Cleaning can be a very painful job. So unfortunately, it was painful for Karna, but he has been cleansed. So with this, we pause. Any questions before we conclude?
Karna was Amsha of Surya Devata. Why did he behave the way he did?
He was an Amsha of Surya Devata, then why did he behave the way he did behave? Even the Devatas behave really badly. So firstly, the Devatas are not the same all the time. The Devatas are positions that are held, and different souls sit in those positions for yugas. One yuga, one soul sits there. Just like the presidency of any country, it's on rotation. So who's Indra Devata at any given point in time is different. So there are stories of Indra Devata coming and tempting Ahalya. They're not perfect people. That's what's really horrible of that Indra, what he did to Ahalya and then what Ahalya had to face. And there's other things also where there was that, what was his name, that king? And he did 100 Ashwamedha Yagnas. He was doing the 100th Ashwamedha Yagna. What was it? Prithu, King Prithu. And then Indra kept stealing the horse. That was a different Indra to the one that bugged Ahalya. Yeah, and even Chandra Devata, he has lots of partialities between the wives and then made all the wives fight with each other. And then it's so much amangama with like, so the Devatas aren't perfect beings. They jivas like you and me who have impurities, shortcomings, and they also still on their journey. So Surya Devata is now by no means perfect, but yes, they have to do a fair amount of punya to get to that position. But interesting thing about punya, you can do punya and not get cleansed. For example, you can give immense amounts in charity, but have pride about it. So you get the punya of giving in charity, but you're not cleansed of pride. So you still do foolish things because you're proud. You can do seva, which gives you punya, and you'll see it in ashrams all the time. You can do so much seva, but have so much jealousy for the, for the other devotee. That's also getting attention or getting chance to do seva. So you get the punya of doing seva, but you're not cleansed. So you need punya to get these positions of Surya Devata, Indra Devata, etc., etc. That doesn't mean they are highly evolved souls. Few of them were highly evolved souls also. Like Yamraj of Katha Upanishad. And like I said, each of the Pandavas was Indra Devata in one of their previous lives. So when Bhim at one point was an Indra Devata, but you see Bhim living the full entirety of all emotions. Yeah. Arjuna himself was Indra Devata in one of his lifetimes, but he's pretty good. But he still has little vanity, little pride, little attachment. He has a lot of attachments. So just by virtue of being a Devata does not make them perfect. Krishna is perfect. Have no doubt. Why are you laughing? Krishna is perfect. Why are you laughing at that statement?
Perfect. So, but if only would have spoken up right in the beginning, the minute we walked into that competition.
If Kunti had spoken out right in the beginning, when the minute he walked into the competition, yes, there would be no Mahabharata.
No, they may have been, but he would have been a Pandava.
He would have been a Pandava. So it's Kunti's fault.
I'm not blaming. Women couldn't keep secrets then.
If women couldn't keep secrets then, he'd be a Pandava.
And even
Yeah.
even Bhishma Pitama recognized.
Bhishma Pitama did recognize him. So why did women have to get cursed? You go ask Yudhishthira this question. I also don't like Yudhishthira's curse one single bit. Because it's been used on me, huh? So, like, yeah, whatever.
It's not to me, yeah, whatever.
I think what it means is that women are more expressive. They don't hold things in. I don't think it's that they can't keep a secret. I think it's that they're more expressive, right? So they'll say. It's a blessing and a curse. I agree. Women being more expressive does allow them to have less stress in it. But now again, with gender, it's all very fluid. So now who did Yudhishthira curse exactly? Actually, I was going to talk on I'll just mention this before we conclude. So one of the reasons that Krishna was so headstrong about Karna has to meet his end as per the curse and all the curses, right? And that he had to go through this horrible destiny, which he himself created for himself, is because, and one of the reasons that Krishna was fine with cutting off Dushashan's heart, lied about Dronacharya, is because that game of dice, which we started today's class with, the recap of the game of dice, was where it became very evident that dharma has fallen and people weren't living up to dharma. Because Draupadi as a woman was being treated as a object of sense enjoyment. It was completely forgotten that she's a person. And so very often commentators will say when women are being treated in this way, dharma has fallen. But it's not necessarily women. In that era, it was a male-dominated society, and so they wielded more power and they used it against in whatever way they wanted. And so women were more easily a victim. But it's just in society, when we start viewing people as objects of sense pleasure, dharma has fallen. And sometimes it breaks my heart when I look around. And it's even parents teaching their kids to project themselves as sense objects in how they groom themselves. The minute we stop seeing people as divine beings and start seeing them as physical beings, dharma is already declined. And then as physical beings, when we see them as objects of sense pleasure, and when we fail to give them that respect of choice in being a sense pleasure, then dharma is completely gone. And so how we value really does change. And again in the ashram, I remind people of modest dressing. Because we live in this cosmopolitan city, it's easily forgotten And sometimes younger generation will roll their eyes at me and say, why do you have to be so old-fashioned? And it's because it's so easy to project something that then encourages a way of thinking, turns attention towards sensuousness. And humility is basically that, focusing on we divine beings. We can enjoy pleasures. It's not saying we can't, but when we see each other, when we're seeing each other as divine beings. Okay, stretch, we're in Kali Yuga. We're not seeing each other as divine beings. Are we seeing each other as beings? Worthy of respect and care, kindness. Or are we seeing each other as, what do I get? Who are you to me? This is how Dharma decreases. And so the game of dice is the lowest of the lowest. Because Draupadi gets treated as property of sense pleasure. Not just property, property for sense pleasure. So Krishna's whole focus is cleansing adharma. You must remember the purpose of every avatar. Yada yada hi karmasya. Comes from era to re-establish dharma and to clean away adharma. And so you see that this is what he's doing in the war as a whole, but he's also doing it individually. He's cleansing Karna of his adharma, cleansing Bhishma of his adharma. Bhishma, who lives such a beautifully dharmic life, lying on a bed of arrows. Why? You allowed Draupadi to be insulted. That's your granddaughter. You allowed her to be treated like that. Cleansed. Drona, again, did so much tapas. And in fact, before Drona dies, he himself regrets that he didn't stand up for Draupadi. And so the painful way in which he died, cleansed. We very often don't recognize Krishna's compassion when it comes in the form of cleansing, which can be seen as painful. The more we do recognize pain as Krishna's compassion, the more gracefully we're able to go through it. So, thank you, Krishna. Cleansing the earth and each and every single one of us. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhi Sarve Sambhavantu Sarve Bhadram Pashyantu Pashyantu Prabhavam Asam Varnamata Varnamita Varnamam Varnamachyate Varnasya Varnamadaya Varnamipashishyate Om Shanti 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 Hari